319. 319. Set. 319. Set.
Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood. Spoon, I almost stumbled over your name there a little bit because it's been so long since I've seen you.
I know. It's been quite a while. Everybody thinks that I just went into hiding. I get emails, where are you? And I don't answer. So
Spoon, I'm not even kidding. A couple months ago, I got a frantic email from a reader saying, please don't tell me Tom Silverstein retired. I'm like, no, all is good. The world is going to continue. It's okay. He's just laying low as he should this time of year. Right. So, yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm a man of mystery.
You are that. Spoon, somebody over the summer asked me something about you. I don't even remember what it was. Oh, something. They said, are OTAs optional for Tom Silverstein as well?
It's not in my contract. Yeah,
I tweeted back and I said, it's Spoon's world. We just do what he tells us to.
Yeah, optional Tom activities. That's what OTA stand for. Yeah. Optional Tom activities.
My CBA changed in like 2014 or something like that.
Your agent made sure to get that in there?
Yes.
Everything was agent. Get that OTA language in there. That's funny. Well, OTAs are over. Minicamp is over. Training camp is on the horizon, boys. It starts Wednesday, July 26th, which is just days away here. I want to jump into a lot of different areas, but let's just start off big overview. This will be the first training camp without Aaron Rodgers, of course. What do you want to see? What sort of vibe do you expect? I know, Spoon, you like to work in vibes. So what sort of vibe do you expect from a training camp without Aaron Rodgers?
I don't really know what to expect. And I'm kind of going in that way. Like, I don't have any preconceived notions of how he's going to perform.
He being Jordan Love.
By that I mean Jordan Love. Yeah, what the team is going to look like. I do think there will be a different vibe with Aaron Rodgers gone. There's no way that won't change. What I'm interested to see or hear are if we start to hear some of the grievances that maybe some of the players had over, the way he controlled the team, or do they just move on from the whole thing and it's sort of like turn the page on that era. I'm kind of curious to hear that kind of stuff because, he had such a hold over everything, over, the front office, the locker room, the playing field, the transportation to practice, everything, all about him. And so now that's going to be different.
Ryan?
Hard Knocks. Looking forward to seeing Hard Knocks. Just can't quit them. No, in all seriousness, I think whether it's going to be, like Spoon said, the releasing of grievances, if there are any, or
airing of grievances.
Yeah, or excitement that, Jordan Love, there's a lot of excitement because he's an unknown. But I think within the locker room, there's going to be a lot of excitement because he's young. Like, this is a really young locker room. Jordan Love is right in the age demographic from getting along with his teammates. And you saw the same thing with Brett Favre late in his career, right, Spoon? He was so much older than everyone else in the locker room. And in any collection of humanity, when you're different stage of life, it's different. I think you saw the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. And there's a reason why he had his closest friends, most of them, are with the Jets now. Jordan Love, from an age standpoint, place in his career, fits right in with this locker room because it's a very young locker room. It's amazing how many people in this locker room didn't play with Aaron Rodgers. It's a 13-player draft class, and then they have the undrafted free agents. It's a startling number of players that actually didn't share a locker room with Aaron Rodgers. So I think that balance between is there a sigh of relief, or is it a sigh of excitement?
Do you ever watch Seinfeld?
I've dabbled.
On Festivus, which is December 23rd, they celebrate Festivus, and that's when they have the airing of grievances to get it all out. So maybe they can.
Festivus for the rest.
How like people have Christmas in July. Maybe we can have Festivus in July, and let the locker room air it all out. I don't think they'll do that though. But that being said, yeah, I think it's definitely going to feel a little bit different, and we've seen it already through OTAs and minicamp, just the way the guys respond to Jordan Love. And that's not to say what they respond better or worse than they did to Rodgers, but it's definitely different. If you seeing Jair Alexander like hop up on a trash can to tackle Jordan Love from behind in the middle of his interview, just to like kind of trash talk him, but also say like, I love him. He's the best quarterback in the league. I just don't feel like we would have seen that in the past. So it's going to feel a little different. How do they respond to Jordan as a leader will definitely be interesting, and this is the time for him to do it. While we're on Jordan Love, let's just stay here. I think possibly the best thing to happen to Jordan Love is the fact that there's going to be 2 joint practices this training camp. Because for as much as training camp is when the pads come on, it's when the hitting starts, quarterbacks are still, a little coddled during that time. But having 2 joint practices, 2 different defenses to go up against that are not his own, and one of those being a Bill Belichick defense. Spoon, let's start with you. How beneficial can that be for a young quarterback?
Well, it can be beneficial and it can be detrimental. It depends how it goes. If he throws 12 interceptions, against the Patriots or the Bengals, both of whom have good defenses, what's that going to tell everybody and him, and what kind of pressure is that going to put on him? I think you'll see they'll try to do everything they can to make him successful, which means maybe not call the hardest, most difficult plays they can during those sessions. And generally those sessions are pretty vanilla. They don't really show a lot in those practices. Really what it is just more about competitiveness. It sort of allows them to have more competitive type practices. So I do think it'll be a chance for him to sort of spread his wings a little bit. And, sometimes stuff gets a little chippy, and sometimes it's, there's a lot of chirping and things like that. And maybe that'll bring something out of him. I think it could go either way. But the thing for Packers fans and media and everything is all eyes are going to be on him every day. And during these practices, a lot will be judged fairly or not. Really what only matters are, are the games, the regular season games. But along the way, he's going to be analyzed quite a bit. And so he has to be ready for that.
So you want to see more so how he carries himself in those moments than what he does necessarily?
No, I just think he has to. I just think he has to play. And if he throws a bunch of interceptions, then he has to just keep playing. He has to be a Brett Favre. And if he's throwing getting picked off right and left, keep doing it. Keep throwing. Don't crawl up into a ball and all of a sudden become the safe quarterback. He's got to spread his wings.
Ryan, you and I have actually talked about this a little bit during OTAs and minicamp, because I feel like we saw that from Jordan. He made a bad play and he didn't let it get him down. He immediately came out and, would swing the next play, which is, to Spoon's point, can be detrimental to a young quarterback when you let it affect you mentally. Is it harder to do that, though, when you're facing another team like you will be in these joint practices?
Well, the thing with a Jordan Love is that there's so much more to discover about him than what we already know about him. And that's extremely rare for a quarterback that's going into his 4th NFL season, especially a first-round pick. That doesn't happen. The last time that happened was 15 years ago, Aaron Rodgers. And that's what makes this fascinating is he's been around for a while now, but we don't know a whole lot about him. So how does he respond to those moments? And even more, what kind of quarterback is he going to be? Is he going to treat interceptions like the plague, like a Rodgers mold? Is he not going to care? I would imagine, based on his history, based on people I've spoken with that coach Jordan Love, he's going to be more of the Favre type. I mean, he had 17 interceptions his final college season. Guy did not care. He just kept chucking. And one college coach told me that he's not at all a naturally protective guy. He's more just chuck it, make a play every time he got the ball type of guy. That's how he's wired. Now, he's in the NFL now. He's had 3 years to sit and learn. How does he change? Does he change? Is that just who he is? We don't know at this level, and that's what we're about to find out. I do think that either way, the joint practices will be useful because they can actually run their defense in a way that they can't in preseason. I mean, it's so vanilla on a preseason game field that the joint practices are where you see something. Now, to Spoon's point, yeah, I mean, if he falls flat on his face, that's not what you want going in as the starter week 1 in Chicago. But it gives you a litmus test, a more accurate litmus test for where he actually is against actual NFL defense that's running their stuff. And that's useful for the coaches. It's useful for the offense. As I said, a lot of new pieces on that offense around him. But who's he going to be is going to be the fascinating story of this training camp.
This can just be a yes or no question. Do you think he should play all 3 preseason games?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's got to play a lot. He's got to play, probably at least a half in each of them.
I
maybe
think
the first one he'll play a quarter, but yeah, he's got to play into in the second one, he's got to play into the third quarter.
Yeah, that second one's going to be like the old third one when they had the 4 preseason games. I think it largely depends on how he looks in the first 2. I mean, if he comes out world beater, I wouldn't be surprised if they shut him down for the third one. If he's anything less than that, absolutely, they need to play him all 3.
While we're on quarterbacks, let's just finish this conversation off real quick. Packers signed a new guy this week, Alex McGow, I believe is how you say his name. On paper, you would initially think, okay, camp arm. This guy could come in and push for the backup spot. I mean, he's coming from the USFL where he won MVP. He led his team to the championship there. Past 2 seasons, they've won the championship. And legitimately a dual threat guy. I mean, both of y'all have been around this game a long time. Is this someone that could push? Do you not know? What do you need to see for a backup who is 28, I want to say?
Well, they don't, they've been grooming Danny Etling and, the kid they drafted from Penn State is there, but you can't have too many quarterbacks and why not take a guy who's, the MVP of the USFL. It's absolutely worth taking a look at him, and who knows what you get out of him. I don't know a lot about him. I didn't watch any USFL games, so I don't know what his talent level is, but you got to keep looking. You got to find the best possible backup quarterback you can have for Jordan Love. And they didn't sign a veteran, so
is this their veteran?
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
I got a sense that they weren't going to bring in a 4th quarterback unless they thought that he might be able to do something. I asked Matt LaFleur in the offseason. I don't know about you guys. I was surprised it took so long to get a 4th quarterback on the 90-man roster. I mean, they went the entire spring program with just 3, and I asked Matt LaFleur about that, and he said he felt really good with 3 because they're all young. They all need the reps. It's not like you got a veteran guy, as in the past, Aaron Rodgers, who he wasn't going to take off-season reps. All 3 of these guys were going to take reps. So usually you keep 4 on the off-season roster. It took them until now to do that. But if they feel really good with 3, I don't know that they bring someone in unless they think he might be able to do something.
Maybe he just comes in to push the other ones, Isn't that something they used to do with Favre, Spoon?
Yeah, I just think you don't have right now. They're going into the season. They don't have a backup quarterback, nothing has been decided on the backup quarterback. So bring in competition. Let the more competition, the more it'll you pick the best guy out of the three. And so why not? I just think that's all it is they got to solidify their backup position and try to get as good as they can get at it.
Think about it in terms of this. They have 4 quarterbacks on their roster. One of them has played NFL snaps, and it was less than 80, I think.
Do you guys even see a front runner for QB2 going into camp?
Coming out of OTAs, I would have said Danny. Sean Clifford seems to have a pick. He picked up the offense very, very quickly. I just think Etling's more athletic.
If I had to choose, I'm with you. I would have said Etling as well, but it's such a flip of the coin. And I guess now you got to go 3-sided coin because you got to, three vying for the job. But it's so wide open. I'm with you. I think I'd hedge just slightly toward Danny Etling, but it is so wide open there.
Yeah. Let's move to the guys that are protecting them. It seems to have their left side actually shored up for what feels like the first time in a couple of years without, injuries sort of leaving a question mark there. What about that right side, Spoon? Who were you watching there in those position battles heading into training camp?
Well, I think it's going to be. I think the entire offensive line is going to be a sort of an amorphous.
Good word.
Gathering of players, and I think it's going to move probably weekly where we see different starters. I think, of course, Nyman will probably be on the right side, but he'll also be a backup if they're really limiting Bakhtiari on the left side. I still think like Royce Newman is going to be a factor in this whole thing. There's all these guards that can play all over the place. I just think it'll be a moving target with who's going to be the starter, and it'll depend on who's playing well. And I think we'll see a lot of 1 week will be like, who's starting at right tackle, who's starting at right guard, and the next week will be something else. But, we know that Bakhtiari will be the left tackle, and we know that Jenkins will be the left guard. And I assume, Myers will be the center, although, who's to say that they don't find some kind of combination where Elton Jenkins is the center, or, I don't know. I think it'll be kind of a fascinating thing to watch.
I would think after OTAs, I'd put my money on Josh Myers having his center job back. But yeah, I think that right side still has a lot of question marks. Ryan, who would you be slotting in there if you were making a depth chart today?
Well, I think it's going to be Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Josh Myers. There was no indication he's in any trouble for his job during OTAs, which I thought was one of the
which was weird because they made it very clear at the beginning that he was.
Yeah.
They
Luke
straight
Buckus
up
was like,
yeah,
but Luke Buckus also said, I believe in Josh Myers and he's going to be here a long time. But there was no indication that I think we all kind of thought going in that there's going to be a competition in the center, and there was really no competition in the center. Yeah. So that was one of the more surprising things to me. But if you just base it off the field, there's really not much competition at center. Runyon at right guard, and then it's very 50-50 right now. Probably Nyman at right tackle, but Zach Tom's very much in there. I mean, they were rotating day in, day out at right tackle with first-team reps between the two. So, to me, the right tackle position is the one that's really open. And I think the other 4 are pretty solidified.
Spoon, let me ask you this. They've harped so much on cross-training a lot of these guys, someone like Zach Tom specifically. Do you continue that into training camp, or do you start, whittling down them into 1 or 2 positions? Although I like your idea of Elton Jenkins at center. That could be fun.
Absolutely. You play them all over the place because you never know where injuries happen. And I've just seen it, too many times in camp where someone who, you weren't really expecting, pushes through, and turns out to be someone you didn't really expect to be a starter right away. And they got some young guys with some talent. I wouldn't rule out Sean Ryan making some sort of a play. This guy is a very talented player who was transitioning from tackle to guard, and a lot of people really liked him coming out of college. And so I wouldn't rule him out. Rasheed Walker's got a ton of talent. He just never really put it together, but he had a good camp last year. So I always think the offensive line is never stable until first week of the season. And I think you will see guys moving into positions that you probably didn't expect.
That's a great point about Sean Ryan too. There's so much we don't really know about him in terms of how he can fit into this line, just because we didn't see him last year for so much of the season. But you've still got him there, and he was what, a third or fourth round pick?
Third.
Yeah, he was high.
At some point, we're going to have to talk to him at some point. The reason we didn't see him for the last 6 games is because of the PED suspension. So he was not in the locker room all spring. It'd be really interesting to figure out what happened there.
Yeah. Let's move to receiver, because I feel like running back is probably the one unit on this team that's like, okay, well, we know what's going on there. Actually, no, let's actually stop on running backs for a second. I changed my mind. A.J. Dillon this offseason spent a lot of time talking about, and coaches as well, regaining the power in his legs and his base, and basically saying he didn't do well enough last year compared to the years in the past. He actually said a couple of weeks ago, we were out at his children's book signing, and he told us while we were out there, his wife flipped on his old college tape and his rookie and second year tape from the Packers and said, do you see this guy that's running? That's what we need again this year. And so what do you sort of credit to maybe losing a step there? And he spent a lot of time, and we saw it in OTAs as well, like working on driving his legs again. How much can he push during training camp, or is that something that you have to wait till the game to really see? Really roundabout way of asking that question.
Yeah, I don't know. A.J. Dillon wasn't that impressive to me last year, and I don't know what I'm not sure whether he gets ranked really highly amongst some analysts, quote unquote. I don't, he's not Aaron Jones, and he's not gonna be. I don't see it. I don't know what I know he had a lot of long runs in college and was a pretty dominant guy there, but he has a lot to prove as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, he needs to have a way better season than he did last year. And I don't know what happened to him. If maybe that's just who he is. Yeah. I don't know. Because we haven't seen him in a situation where he's just a dominant player, or he's not even dominant, where he's a legitimate 1,200-yard rusher or something like that.
To answer your question, Cassie, I don't put any stock in a running back till they're getting hit, and they don't get hit in camp. Preseason, but they don't get hit in camp. So with him, I don't imagine he's going to play a ton in the preseason. So I guess it's just wait and see week 1.
But yeah, it's his contract year, so this is the year he has to put it all back together. Okay, now let's move to receivers. Arguably, the unit with a lot of, I would say, the most question marks, but not in a worrisome way, maybe. What do you guys think? I mean, you've got. Okay, you ready, Ryan?
I'm good now. I muted it for you.
Yeah. Receivers, arguably with the most question marks maybe of any unit on this team, but I don't know if I would say that's a bad thing. I mean, Spoon, let's just start with you. You've got a unit where your 3 quote unquote veterans are heading into their second year, and one of them was a 7th round pick last year, and he's now your number 3. Although some of these rookies could definitely push for that point as well. Do you see them maybe try to, like, as the roster cut downs come throughout training camp, could you see them carrying more just to kind of see what they've got? What do you want to see out of the receivers heading into camp?
Well, I think it is a troublesome position. They've got a lot of talent there, but just because they had, flashed a little bit their first year doesn't necessarily mean their second year is going to be great. Ask Davante Adams about that. And we have no idea, can Christian Watson be the guy he was for all of last year? I mean, he's going to get a lot more attention. People know about him now. I don't know. I think by the end of camp, they could wind up picking some veteran up who, another team discards, just because they're going to need somebody who can, I don't know who's leading that room, who's saying, this is what you should look for, when the safety comes down and linebacker drops or whatever. I don't think they have that guy in their room. And so I do think at some point they will try to pick up a veteran, but they're just going to be relying on some really young green guys who, it's going to be sort of, defensive coordinators are going to be like, okay, we're going to throw all kinds of stuff at Jordan Love and we're going to throw all kinds of stuff at his receivers and we're going to shut them down because they're not going to know how to deal with it. And I mean, that's how I would look at it if I were a defensive coordinator.
That's a great point about being able to kind of confuse them. I did see a stat yesterday, or Vegas has Christian Watson's current over-under on touchdowns for the season at 4.5. You hitting the over or the under? I think I'd go over too, and that's mostly just because who else is going to take it?
Great question.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you want to see out of a very, very young group and how they progress?
Know that I would pick up a veteran, and this is the reason why. Because they're not contending in 2023. And I said the same thing as far as just because Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are talented doesn't mean that they're going to have bang-up second seasons because, as Spoon said, Davante Adams. But they are essential to your 2 to 3 year window here, that the growth period that they have. They're not contending in 2023. If you want to be good 2025, you're probably going to need Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. They're very important to the fabric, the foundation of this offense. And I think there's something to be said for letting happen what happened with Davante Adams in 2015, which was take your lumps and learn from it, get better. And that's what Davante Adams did. If you bring in a veteran, you're taking snaps from guys that need to go through it. If it gets rough, they need to go through that. They need to learn from it. They need to be on the field regardless, because it's not about 2023. So I fully agree with Spoon. Just because Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs had really solid rookie years doesn't guarantee a great second year. It doesn't mean that they're just going to continue to build on that trajectory and just get better and better. It almost rarely works that way. But they got to play a lot. I mean, whether it's rain or shine, they need to be on the field, and they need to be learning from their mistakes and building off what they did last year.
To Spoon's point, though, because I totally get what you're saying, Ryan, is there not some value in having just a veteran like out there with you at practice? Did Davante not have Jordy? I'm trying to think of the timeline, just to kind of like teach him.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of veteran you're bringing in. If it's a Sammy Watkins type, that's
somebody that won't take your snaps, maybe necessarily.
Yeah. If it's a Sammy Watkins type, you got to put him on the field like they did last year. They tried to do last year. I don't see a lot of value in that. If it's a Randall Cobb type that's not going to be on the field all that much, but can be a veteran in the room, then sure. So not all veterans are the same. But I wouldn't bring anyone in that takes away the snaps of especially Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs. But Jaden Reed's got to play. He's got to go through it. Samari Toure, you got to find out what you got in him this season.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of young guys at that position that you really need to figure out who they are and what they can mean to you 2 to 3 years down the road.
Yeah. I think you've got Watson, Romeo, Toure, Jaden Reed, Tay Wicks. I would say those 5 are a lock. What do you get out of guys like Malik Heath in camp? I think Jeff Cotton's a good practice guy. I don't know if he's a gamer, but somebody like Malik Heath could be a sneaky little number 6. We'll see.
He was sneaky in the spring program.
He was
running with the ones. We're like, what?
Mark this podcast episode if Malik Heath makes the 53. It probably won't happen, but we'll come back to this if he does. So yeah, I want to see guys like that in camp as well, like some of those lower guys. Tight end, like receiver, a lot of unknowns, but this is kind of a good shot for them to make their mark. I'm going to take a quick note on tight ends, unless if you both have one, and then we'll move to defense. Spoon, you got any words to string together about tight ends?
I think it'll be a struggle in the early going for them. I think physically it's going to be very much a challenge for them to be factors in the run game. But, I think there's a lot of talent. I think it was a great tight end class. Mm-hmm. And what will matter the most is, where they are in the final month of the season. If they start to become, more reliable targets, but, they can still get something out of those guys. I really do think they can in the passing game. And what probably is more of a worry is what can they do with them in the run game? Can those guys stand up to big, strong outside linebackers, defensive ends, hybrid type guys? So it'll be, I'm interested to see when the first game rolls around, what Matt LaFleur does in the run game and how he uses those tight ends.
Because there's not a Mercedes Lewis now.
No, and there's not even a Robert Tonyan who got much better with time. DeGuara can still block on the run, and you can use a fullback type. Maybe those guys are good movement blockers or turn out to be good movement blockers. It's just, you get down to a 3rd and 1 or something like that, and it really helps to have a big tight end that you can use. Maybe they go to a jumbo thing with Zach Tom as, the tight end or something like that. But that's just going to be something to watch.
I like in college jumbo pack. Or sorry, I was going to say I like in college jumbo packages. They always bring in a defensive lineman just to put some extra weight in there too. Ryan,
it should be said that Josiah DeGuara, who you would think on the outside maybe had a bit of a rough offseason, has been pretty well lauded by the coaching staff for his leadership and the way he's kind of taken ownership of that room, which is important. I mean, similar to what we're talking about with receiver, with such a young room, having someone that's actually played in a couple of years and has seen the NFL, having that guy in the room and accepting his role is important. I actually want to know something from Spoon, though, on tight ends, because this is going to my 10th season covering this team. And I have not seen a highly drafted tight end break into the NFL. I haven't seen it. I mean, they've gone out and gotten Jimmy Graham and Martellus Bennett and Jared Cook, but they haven't actually done what they did with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. I'm curious, what do you even look for with a tight end early in his first camp to know that he's getting it or he's not getting it at that position?
Well, in most cases, it's going to be in the pass game. Like when Jermichael Finley came in, he was not an accomplished blocker and probably a lot like these other two guys, although his athletic ability was off the charts. What you just saw was they were used more as extended tight ends, and so they didn't do a ton in the run game, but they were still factors in the pass game. Jermichael Finley, I mean, it took a while for him to really come on, but he was really raw too, and hadn't played as much college football as these other guys. So I think you just look for what their potential contribution is in the pass game, and can they, find a niche where they can get open and make 2 or 3 catches a game. That's really what you kind of look for.
That sounds a lot like Luke Musgrave, but now, granted, we haven't seen him in pads yet, so yeah. I don't know. But it just based off the reps of his first OTAs and minicamp, it sure looks like he's going to be tight end 1 sooner than later. And it's because he's not just taking first team reps, but like you said, he's moving around the field. I mean, he's that flex guy. He's splitting out wide. He's lining up in multiple spots. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with him, especially when they put the pads on.
With him, though, like, I want to see some sort of consistency from day to day in camp, because that was his issue during the summer. He would have a day where, Love targeted him over and over, to your point, at 5 different points of the field, and he hauled in everything, and he was moving downfield. He was turning upfield. He was getting space. And then the next day, Love targets him 5 times, and he drops 4 of them. Like, he just straight up drops them. And so can he at least string together some sort of consistency from day to day is going to be key, because he is tight end 1. It's him. And I don't know if he has the luxury of taking his lumps as much as some of these other units where they have more guys to lean on. Let's move to defense. Guys, I was having this discussion with someone the other day about what unit are you most concerned about if you're the Packers? And there's a lot of different units that have questions, I would say. But as far as the most concern, I feel like it would have to be safety, because with receiver, tight end, defensive line, so much of it feels like they're just kind of throwing, especially on defensive line, it feels like they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But at least in those units, the talent is there. Do they have enough pieces in the safety unit to sort of cobble together a viable NFL safety group?
I don't know. I think that's still yet to be seen. It depends on, who they move around and how they play those guys. I mean, are they going to use them as, nickel guys? Do they play Savage, maybe at safety, but he's also coming down to cover guys? Do they, do they kind of flip Russell Douglas there at times? Or, it seems like they're not interested in moving him at all. But I don't think anything is really solved, and I think it probably is still a weak spot in their on their team. But they can make up for it if their corner play is really good, and that's, I think, what they're counting on more than anything, is that their corners just dominate. I mean, that's what they're going to have, and I don't know what the safety position. I think anything they get out of it will be a bonus to their season.
I've got Pete Doherty's voice in the back of my head when we talk about most concerning positions, because I guarantee he'd say, what about edge rusher? Because in the very likely event that Rashawn Gary's not going to be ready to go week 1, how quickly can Lucas Van Ness get ready? And he's probably going to play a lot. I think they got a little more depth there than they've had in the past, but not top of the rotation guys at edge rusher. With safety, I think so much of it comes down to Darnell Savage, getting him right. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just got to get Darnell Savage right. At the very least, get him right? Whoever's next to Darnell Savage, that's a huge question mark too. But if they have last season's Darnell Savage, safety there's only so much you can do, because Adrian Amos isn't there anymore. You don't have that veteran experience on the back end. Darnell Savage at his best can be awfully good. I mean, there's potential there. There's talent there. We've seen it in the NFL. It's just been so sporadic that they've got to get him right again. and then find someone to line up next to him. So there's a lot of work to do there. But I think it starts with getting Darnell Savage right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. What does he give you? Especially because you don't really know coming off last season which Darnell Savage is he going to be. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
well, wait a minute. Which one is he going to be? I mean, we've only seen one of him.
I think late 2020 was it when he had 4 picks in a month. We've seen a very short flash. To the most part, I think that he's struggled, but he's the fastest player in their secondary. He's rangy. He does not track the deep ball well at all, but he has athletic ability. He has talent. There's potential there, and I think we've seen a flash of it. I wouldn't say it's ever been consistent, but if they can untap that, then they have something. But that's a huge if.
Spoon, I thought you were about to get onto me for ending a sentence in a preposition. I thought that's what you were stopping me. Yeah, that's a fair point, though, to both of your points. I mean, Tavarius Moore is your veteran there, but, again, they bring in Jonathan Owens, one of the best tackling safeties in the league last year. But, again, there's always a caveat to that point. He was playing behind the worst rushing defense in the NFL. Do you let Rudy Ford sort of keep that spot there that he had, quote unquote, earned by the end of last year? I think they keep Keyshawn Nixon at nickel. He seemed to say multiple times during summer, like, that's my spot. I don't feel like people are scared to tell Keyshawn Nixon no. So he may just have walked in and taken it or taken it. Good thing I don't work in words. But to both of y'all's point, it doesn't necessarily matter as much if the front 7 and the corners can lock it down. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of camp they've signed a different safety. Like if they let one of these guys go and we see a new face in there. But if you've got those corners with Jair, Rasul, Nixon at nickel, Eric Stokes is going to get rotated back in there at some point. I mean, is that unit feels set? Is that safe to say? And is that kind of what do you want to just see consistency from them during camp? Like Rasul on one side, Jair on the other, Nixon at nickel? Or do you want to see any other faces in there just for fun? Carrington Valentine, a rookie who had some flashes during OTAs as well. We might see him get snaps just to see if he can make the team. But does that unit feel pretty set? Is that safe to say?
Going in, yeah, it does. I mean, but there's a lot to be seen yet as to whether Stokes is back. And, let's not forget he wasn't all-pro corner to begin with last year before he got hurt. So there's always room for someone. I mean, I've seen first rounders, come in and lose their jobs. So it's not guaranteed. You never know how things play out. You never know who's going to get hurt, who's going to have a bad season. So I just think they're going to run guys in there like they always do. And, we'll see Jair Alexander out there. We'll see Rasul Douglas out there. It's likely we'll see Eric Stokes and Keyshawn Nixon. I just think those will be their key players. But I still think they'll be looking at a lot of other guys who can help them, to see if they can help them.
Keyshawn Nixon at outside or always inside?
I don't think he would be outside.
He doesn't have the height to play outside.
I think you're going to see Keyshawn Nixon in the slot a ton in camp to get a really good look at him. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to project to the way it'll be in the regular season, because Jair Alexander doesn't need a lot of practice whether he's in the slot or perimeter. Just like Spoon was talking about with the offensive line, Jair Alexander, you can ideally, if Joe Barry has learned from past mistakes, you could line him up slot or perimeter week by week based on the game plan, which might be where Eric Stokes comes into play. Because if you have a week where you got to put Jair Alexander on their best guy, he's a slot guy, you can have Eric Stokes come in potentially if he rectifies what he put on film last year, and he's your perimeter guy opposite Rasul Douglas and Jair Alexander's in the slot, or if Jair Alexander's be in the perimeter. You can have Keyshawn Nixon in the slot, Rasul Douglas on the opposite perimeter. So if they can get 4 good corners, that's a good luxury to have. It's a good problem to have, fitting them on the field, because you have more flexibility to go game-by-game basis. But again, that's if they use Jair Alexander that way.
I asked Jair about this during OTAs. I said, last year you and Rasul Douglas were essentially arguing over who got to play slot, and now Keyshawn Nixon comes in here and just says it's his. Are you just going to let him take it from you? And he essentially said, I'll play where I want to play, and Keyshawn will adjust.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that during camp a couple of times, especially if it's like, you know, joint practice against the Bengals and Jamar Chase lines up in the slot. I can see Jair going in there and pulling Keyshawn out and being like, no, let me have him. So we'll see how they work that out amongst themselves. Let's spend a quick couple of minutes on the defensive line before we wrap up. That unit, as you said, Pete would say, has a lot of question marks as well. I'm not necessarily as concerned about that. They're definitely making a shift to more hybrid, fast, twitchy on the edges, which is kind of what you have to be in today's NFL. There's probably going to be some growing pains as they do this, but it feels like they have more depth there, agree or disagree. And as such, what do you need to see out of this unit in camp, Spoon? And you can work your way across the board, outside to inside.
Again, it's, I think Ryan touched on it. They've got to have outside pressure. They have to figure out who that's going to be till Rashawn Gary is back. And, they drafted Lucas Van Ness for a reason. And, they're going to expect him to, be able to contribute both outside and inside, not linebacker, but defensive line. I do think there's, potential for some issues there. I don't know who's going to be dynamic. I don't know what kind of shape Preston Smith's going to come in. That's always something to keep an eye on. They don't have a dominant pass rusher other than Gary, and that's a problem. So we'll see, and we'll see whether they use Quay Walker some there. I think they probably will have to out of necessity, and then we'll see.
Like bring him up. Like bring him up.
Yeah, play him. Maybe he does play in nickel where he's an outside rusher. I don't know. I think they can do whatever they want with him because he's athletic enough. It's just I don't know if he can be a outside rusher. There's a lot of skill involved there, so it's kind of a worrisome thing. And then I think they're fine at inside linebacker. I think with Campbell and Walker, they should be fine.
Yeah, I think it's awfully problematic too because it's your second most important position on the field behind quarterback. Quarterbacks win games. Affecting the quarterback is the biggest antidote you have against that, and you do that predominantly from the edge. And they have more depth, like Justin Hollins and JJ Inibare, as a third and a fourth, maybe a fourth and a fifth. That's better than they've maybe had in those spots in the past, but they don't have a top of the line guy until Rashawn Gary comes back. And Preston Smith, if you put him on the field with Rashawn Gary, he might be able to be effective. And it was, to his credit, he ended once Rashawn Gary went down in Detroit last year. Preston Smith started getting after the quarterback, and he said something for himself. But you put him with Lucas Van Ness, who Rashawn Gary didn't come in as a rookie, basically drafted in the same spot and start being a game record from week one, his first season. I mean, it took Rashawn Gary time, and look what he is now. It's hard to see Lucas Van Ness doing much different just because that's the nature of being a rookie in this league. So who are your top line guys there? As far as the defensive line goes, there isn't the depth that you might have at outside linebacker. I mean, point blank, Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, they're probably going to have to get some snaps because you only go really three deep there. It's Kenny Clark again, and then you've got Devontae Wyatt, you got TJ Slayton, and then you're looking at rookies. So unlike last year with Devontae Wyatt, where they could give him 3/4 of his rookie season and say, hey, just sit tight, be patient, learn, absorb everything, and get better, they might not have that luxury because there's no Jerron Reed, there's no Dean Lowry, and think what you want about Dean Lowry, but he ate a lot of snaps in his time. So they don't have those snap eaters that they had a year ago. You're going to – I think there's some depth issues there because rookies in the trenches in the NFL take time to adjust.
Yes, agree with everything both of you said. But how do we see those rookies react during training camp? Because just to kind of reiterate, unlike safety, I feel like they have more in their cupboard. Interior defensive line, outside edge rusher, even linebacker. I just feel like they have a little bit more there. How fast can they catch up is going to be the question. So that's what we will look at during camp. Guys, I know we're running out of time. We didn't get to hit on special teams. We will hit on that as we get into training camp because there are still some questions there with Anders Carlson. How is he going to progress as he works his way into the NFL? Seemed to be pretty set at returner. We'll get into that more as we get into training camp. So apologies that we didn't get to special teams today. Before we do sign off, you each get your last minute. Spoon, I don't think we've talked about this with you since we haven't received you this summer. Did you finish Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Hey.
Also, I couldn't talk about it till Ryan finished it, and he waited weeks.
I appreciate you, Kassidy.
Thoughts on the ending?
Yes, I did. Did I mention that I was on that bridge that
where Rebecca fell off in Amsterdam.
Yes. So
very, very cool. How was your European gallivanting?
It was awesome. It was just terrific. I enjoyed being in 3 different cultures and different from here. And it was really, really nice to get away.
What was your favorite thing you saw in Europe?
Well, the Eiffel Tower was pretty cool, but I just liked my favorite thing was taking all the mass transportation and people watching. I just love doing that. I wish Wisconsin had mass transportation like that, like a bullet train to Green Bay, by the way, which when I first started this job, I envisioned them having a bullet train from Milwaukee to Green Bay, and I wouldn't have to drive every time, but it never happened. So I just really enjoyed that. I enjoyed people watching and the culture. So that's what I liked the most.
That's very cool. I had to go to a wedding in Florida last month, and when I came back, there were no flights.
Speaking of other cultures.
That is a whole other country. You need a passport. I couldn't get a flight back into Green Bay, and so I finally just bit the bullet, and I took a flight back into Chicago, but I'd flown out of Green Bay. There were no rental cars because it was the weekend before 4th of July, summer, and there was a massive NASCAR race in Chicago. So I had to take the bus from Chicago to Milwaukee, which was fine. That was fun. And then I took the train from Chicago to Milwaukee, and then I had to take buses from Milwaukee to Green Bay to get back. That was quite an adventure. So yes, I'm on board with your bullet train idea. Ryan, your last minute, go.
I need to right a wrong because Kassidy, the last time we talked, I talked to you about, the summer plans going down to my parents' lake home in Indiana. And I neglected to say that I was also going to be able to spend time with my little niece, Nora. And that was the highlight of my summer. She's going on 3 years old. Little redhead, very adorable. So I apologize that I neglected to do that. And Uncle Ryan loves you, Nora. It was great seeing you. But Kassidy, what I need to know from you in your final 60 seconds, I need a pitch. I saw you went to the Barbie movie, right? Mm-hmm. I need a pitch because if you can't see the board behind me, I'm getting suckered into going to that movie. Am I going to hate my time or is it going to be okay?
I loved it.
Okay.
It's very much a girl power movie, so know that going in. But it was hilarious. Yeah, I say but like girl power was a bad thing. It was girl power and it was hilarious. Margot Robbie was perfect as Barbie. Ryan Gosling had me like rolling laughing the entire movie. Every character in it was just perfectly cast. It's very much a meta comedy, so if you like stuff like that, you'll really enjoy it. Sort of like a little bit of dark comedy, but in a very bright pink world. I really, really, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. I'm going to take final 20 seconds. I recently finished the Netflix series Quarterback. It's a little slow to get into, but if you keep going, it actually gets really interesting. It's really interesting to watch before football season just to kind of see how these guys train. And I thought the juxtaposition of having Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins both on there was really interesting because they approach the week vastly different. Like you could not have probably picked two more different quarterbacks, but that was cool to see how someone like Patrick Mahomes, who is extremely, extremely athletic, spends time on his body versus Kirk Cousins, who knows he's not as athletic. So he purposely spends more time like actually training his brain. I mean, they're both extremely intelligent guys, but like Kirk Cousins actually like hooks himself up with these little things and trains his brain. So it's interesting to see how different they approach it. I recommend giving it a watch before the season because it'll make you see the game a little bit differently through their eyes.
I'm wondering where that brain reminder thing to pay attention was when I was in school.
Right. I could have used that.
Oh, I needed that. Because,
yeah.
I mean, you put me in a classroom and it's all Z's. I'm just doing so I could have used that. I didn't know they had that technology. That's cool.
Maybe that's a Kirk Cousins exclusive. Guys, thank you for your time. As always, look forward to seeing you both out there this week at training camp. As a reminder for those listening, the first 3 practices, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, are open to the public as well. All 3 of those practices start at 10:30 a.m. at Ray Nitschke Field. We'll see you out there. Give us a shout. Spoon will probably just wave and keep walking. I'm just kidding. He loves interacting with
me. I don't do autographs.
No pictures, please. No
Only
pictures.
for me. No.
Guys, thank you so much. We will see you next time. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.
Green 19. Green 19. Set. Green 19. Set.